Good morning. I'm Brenda Talent, CEO of the Show Me Institute. We are a nonpartisan, independent research and charitable organization focused on free market solutions to Missouri public policy issues. We're about policies, not politics. We study economic and fiscal issues within the state of Missouri and make detailed recommendations based on that research. You can learn more about our work at showmeinstitute.org. I don't want to hold up our discussion today, but let me get some housekeeping out of the way. Zach Lawhorn, the Communications Director of Show Me Opportunity, will be the moderator for our questions. To ask a question, look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A box there. Just type in your question, and you can submit them at any time. Today's program is about the MOScholars program. In 2021, the Missouri General Assembly created this program. It allows individuals and businesses to receive state tax credits for contributions to certified educational assistance organizations. Let me introduce our panel. They're going to explain how this program works and how you or your clients or friends can take advantage of it. Keith Kehrer is a partner with Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner. His practice focuses on issues related to tax-exempt organizations. Keith received his law degree from Washington University, Order of the Coif, and a Master's of Law from New York University. Derek Rose is counsel with Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner, where his practice focuses on federal and state tax controversy matters. Derek received his law degree cum laude from the University of Missouri. Susan Pendergrass is the Director of Research at the Show Me Institute. She holds a doctorate in public policy and an MBA in finance. Susan has studied education finance extensively, including how tax credit scholarship programs like MOScholars can expand educational freedom and opportunity. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to our panelist.
This is Keith. I think I am up first. Zach, can you put the slides up?
Yes. Give me 1 second.
Great, thank you. I just want to start, appreciate the opportunity to be here and start by saying that I've actually had the privilege to work with one of the approved educational assistance organizations since inception of this program back in 2021. And so I've got to see firsthand this program grow and flourish. And I've got to see firsthand how important the impact has been. And I know Susan, a little bit later, will talk about that. But I just wanted to start by saying, this is a really great program that I personally believe in. And so I was excited to be here today to talk about it. Next slide. Today we're going to talk about a few different things. I'm going to expand a little bit on what Brenda said about what is MOScholars and talk a little bit about the donation process. And then Derek is going to talk about eligibility and accepted donations and the tax benefits. And then Susan is going to talk about non-tax benefits and program impact. And then at the end, we've reserved some time for questions. So please, if you have questions, add them to the chat and we'll try to talk about them at the end. Next slide. So what is MOScholars? So as Brenda said, in 2021, the Missouri General Assembly passed legislation called the Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, commonly known as MOScholars. The purpose of this program was to promote educational opportunities and quality of educational services. Another purpose was to provide options for Missouri families and enable Missouri families to customize an education that works for their individual students. A key part of the program was the tax credits, which we're here to focus on mostly today, in order to help facilitate fundraising and funding for the program. The law allows for Missouri state tax credits for contributions to approved nonprofit educational assistance organizations, so-called EAOs, which are basically nonprofit 501c3 charitable organizations. These EAOs in turn, raise the money and in turn provide scholarships for students, for qualified Missouri students. Briefly, qualified students include those that have an individual educational plan or those living in low-income households. If you're an eligible or qualified student, you can set up a scholarship account with an EAO. And then the families in turn that have their scholarship requests approved can use those funds for a whole wide range of things, including tuition, fees, and books at qualified schools. Qualified schools include private schools, charter schools, public schools, virtual schools. It also includes other things such as expenses for educational therapies, tutoring services, and transportation, just to name a few. There's a whole list of qualified expenses that these funds can be used for in the statute. Next slide. So how does the donation process work? This is a very high-level summary, but basically, if you're interested in being a donor, the donor visits the Missouri State Treasurer Office website to reserve a tax credit. It's very easy. You basically just fill out your name, and Derek will go through some of this, and you'll receive a confirmation. Within 30 days of receiving that confirmation, you'll get a confirmation from the EAO that you chose. So as part of that, you'll choose an EAO. You then donate to the EAO within 30 days, and then they'll submit that to the state treasurer's office. The state treasurer's office then processes the tax credit, sends you a receipt, and every month the EAO will send reports to the state treasurer's office about who has donated and how much they donated, et cetera. And then finally, when you go to prepare your tax return, you make sure that you include what you need to claim the credit. And that's what Derek's going to talk about. And so I'm going to, one more slide. Sorry. Next slide, yeah. Thank you. In order to be eligible,
In
order to be eligible, basically you got to be a Missouri taxpayer. You have to file a Missouri income tax return and not be a dependent of someone else. So an individual who files a state income tax return, an individual firm, partner, corporation, or shareholder in an S corp that does business in the state and is subject to Missouri state income tax is eligible. And an express company that basically pays tax on their gross receipts is also eligible. There's a minimum contribution of $500 or more. And it's basically checks drawn on your bank account, money orders, or electronic fund transfers. I will say I'm a donor for this program, and I'm an Illinois resident, but yet I pay Missouri income taxes because Bryan Cave is located in Missouri. So I'm also able to take advantage of this just personally. So
Zach, can you go to the next slide? So Keith was talking about this. So the next few slides are kind of talking about how it's pretty easy to do this. And in fact, Keith did this morning and walked through today and actually made a donation today. And so it happened. I think we can both report quickly and smoothly. And it doesn't take a lot of computer savvy to do, but we'll kind of walk through. So if you're interested in making one of these donations to an EAO, this should allow you to do it pretty easily. So the first step with everything computer-based, at least if you're my age, is you do a Google search. And so this is slide 6. And so we just Google reserve MOScholars credit because that's what we want to do. And so this is the screen you look at, and then you'd click on that link, and then you'd go to the next slide. Excuse me. And so this is the link on as you see up at the top. This is the Missouri State Treasurer's Office website, and it's actually one part of the website. The Missouri K through 12 scholarship program. And so the first thing that you do, Keith just said that it's not just individuals who can sign up for this. It's also other types of business entities, corporations, S corps, express companies, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing that you would do is pick who you are. And so in this case, in this example, we picked an individual. And so you click on the individual thing, and then you would go to the next slide, Zach. And then it says, so since you're an individual, the next thing it asks you is if you're married and filing a joint return. And so we decided that this individual, just like Keith, is married and filing a joint return. So we clicked yes. So then we go to the next slide. This part we didn't put Keith's information in on. But so again, it's pretty simple, name, socials, address, et cetera, et cetera. So you put that in so they can confirm who you are. And then we would go to the next slide. And so at this point, then you can select your EAO. And so you'll see in about the middle of the page, it says select organization. And there are a number of organizations that are set up and approved by the state of Missouri to act as EAOs under the program. And so some of these EAOs are focused on geographic areas. Some of them are focused on particular religious type schools. Some of them are focused on more broadly based. And there's a listing of the EAOs so you can kind of get the information about which EAOs are supporting what types of schools and what level of schools. And so after you've, kind of looked through that and seen which one that you want to get, you get a drop down menu. And so on the day that we did this, which was not today, but it was, so there are 6 EAOs on the day that we did this search that had available credits. And so the numbers that you see next to each of those is how much in available credits that these particular EAOs have the ability to function through. And so, we selected for this one, we selected Herzog Tomorrow. And so on the day that we did this, they had 4 million, whatever it says, $4.4 million of credits to administer. And so if we chose that, then the next thing that would come up would be the expected donation amount. And so, as Keith has said, and it's on one of the earlier slides, the minimum donation amount is $500. So you could donate $500 or some amount higher than that $500, and then you would put that in here. So then the next slide, you have to, as everything on the internet, you have to agree to the terms and conditions. And so these are the terms and conditions for dealing with the tax credit. So the first one, which is probably the most important one, is that the donation has to actually be made within 30 days of the date of the tax credit reservation request. So what you're doing by attesting here is you're not actually at this point giving money to the EAO. What you're doing is saying to the treasurer's office, hey, I'm going to give this amount of money to the EAO, and I want you to reserve for me a credit under the MOScholars program. The remaining terms and conditions, for lack of a better word, are basically things that we'll talk about when we're talking about the value of the Missouri tax credits. And we'll talk about those later on the slide. And then the last thing is you have to do it yourself. You can't have an agent reserve a credit for you. You have to do this yourself. So they've made it pretty simple for you to do it yourself. So you don't really need an agent or an attorney to help you do this. So then you agree to that, assuming that you're going to go forward. And then the next slide says, it's a customer service thing. How are you referred to the website? And you can say, I went to this awesome talk, and Derek walked me through how to get through.
I don't remember that being on there, but
it should be, but it should be. But it should be. But it says how did you come to figure out that the smoke credit was available? Why do you know this? So they're trying to figure out a better, how best to contact the public to make them aware of this availability. Then of course you have to demonstrate that you're not a robot, which is the next slide. And then at that point, after you attest, then you're cleared. And at that point, you have reserved a credit.
I'll stop just for a second.
Yeah.
I want to interject. So after that, you'll get pretty quickly. Within 10 minutes, I got an email from the EAO that I selected saying, thank you for selecting and making a donation to us. If you have any questions, we're here to help you walk through the process from here going forward. And here's a ACH link. If you'd like to make a payment by the ACH link, click on this. If you'd like to send us a donation via check, here's the address, name and address to send that check. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're here to help. And so I clicked the link, and it took me to you got to then select your bank. If your bank was listed, I selected my bank, which was on there, and it took me right to my bank, and I was able to sign into my bank account, and it uses Stripe, a third-party system, to very quickly and easily facilitate my donation. So it was all said and done. It took me a total of less than probably 5 minutes to do all of this. from start to finish. And now I'm kind of in a waiting period where the EAO will then notify the state, as I said earlier, that I made my donation. State will send them, the credit, and then EAO will send me the information. And then the only thing I have left to do is to, when I file my 2025 Missouri income tax return, make sure that I do what I need to do to claim the credit. So
Yeah,
sorry,
no, that's right. Because I watched this happen this morning, and so the whole process was certainly less than 10 minutes. And so at this point, so Keith went on the website, walked through the last 6-8 slides, did that, and then the EAO that he selected got back with him and said, "Hey, we just got word that you reserved a credit with us. You have to pay within 30 days. How would you like to pay? And if you want to pay by electronically through your bank account, here's how to do it." And it was as easy as buying something on Amazon. I mean, it was, and it's done. And so, the money has been transferred. And then at this point, the Secretary of State's office will come back, and this part will not be instantaneous, but it will be relatively quick. But the Secretary of State's office will process the credit. They'll see that, Keith reserved this credit. The EAO got the money, and so they will provide the receipt, or what I call the certificated tax credit, to the EAO, and the EAO will at that point give Keith a copy of it, and that is what Keith will give to the tax. I think I said Secretary of State, is the Treasurer's office. So my bad on that. So in addition to doing good, this is a situation of doing good by doing well. Let's talk about the features of the tax credit. So as we said, Keith will get this piece of paper that is worth 100% of the amount of his donation to the EAO. But the tax credit that he can apply to his current tax return may not exceed half of his state tax liability for the tax year in which the credit is claimed. So let's say Keith's tax liability for Missouri, these are what the examples are for. So let's say Keith's tax liability for Missouri would be $50,000, which would be a heck of a year for Keith and Bryan Cave. But let's say that it was. And let's also say that he made a donation the amount of $50,000, which he also did not do. But if that were the case, Keith would have received a piece of paper from the Treasurer's office saying, here's a receipt for a credit in the amount of $50,000. He would attach that to his Missouri tax return, and at the end of the day, he would owe no tax. So that's example one. What example two is a situation, which is what we just talked about. The credit can not be used to exceed half of the donor's state tax liability. So let's say the same credit, the same donation was made, or he's got the same tax liability, but instead of making a $50,000 donation, he made a $100,000 donation. So in that case, he can only use the tax credit. And so in that case, he can only use $50,000. I think example one isn't actually correct, but because you would be limited to half of your state tax liability, and so that should really be the tax on one should really be the same in that case. So I don't know how that's up there, but it did. But in any event, what it is saying is your credit can only be equal to half of your liability, and if you have any excess on top of that, that credit has to carry forward to the next year. Or actually, it's not just the next year; it can be any of the next 4 subsequent tax years. So, in the case on example 2, year 1 and year 2, in the first year, $50,000 of the donation was utilized to eliminate Missouri tax due. And in the second, even though there was no donation made, that amount was carried forward to year 2 such that no tax would be due. And so long as you have Missouri tax liabilities in future years, you can make donations in excess of half of your state tax liability and still utilize the credits. The last bullet point on here says that the tax credit is not sellable, transferable, or refundable. So what does that mean? So many Missouri tax credits that are certificated, meaning that you get a piece of paper that says this piece of paper is worth a credit of X against your Missouri income tax. Those are the legislature in some of those instances had said these pieces of paper representing tax credits, if you can't or don't choose to use them, are sellable on the open market. And so there is a market for transferable tax credits. Typically, when people transfer them, they are not sold at 100% of par because there's transaction costs involved. So you're generally better off using them rather than selling them. But if you have credits that you can't use, people are able to sell them at a discount to people who can. This is not one of those credits. This is a use or lose credit, other than it's use or lose over a 5-year period. The last word on that bullet is tax. This tax credit is also not refundable. And so what a refundable tax credit means is you get a tax credit that exceeds your Missouri tax liability. For a refundable tax credit, at that point, the State Department of Revenue would write you a check and issue you a tax refund, just like I'm sure many of you have been in a situation on your personal Missouri income tax returns where your withholding exceeds your liability and you get a refund. In this case, if your credit exceeds your liabilities, you don't get a refund. What you get to do is carry the credit over for another 4 years. So again, in most instances, there's a time value of money involved if the credit exceeds the limit of your ability to use. But since you can carry it over for 4 years, you will generally be able to use the entirety of the credit.
Do you want to go through example one again?
Yeah, so what example one should say, example one should be the same as example two, except the credit would only be in this instance because your liability is $50,000. The credit should only be in the amount of $25,000. And you'd be again in a situation where you'd have a $25,000 credit. You would owe $25,000 in tax, and then you would carry forward the credit to year 2. Hopefully that's clear. If people have questions, since this slide is unclear, we can talk about it during the Q&A session. The takeaways are, this is a dollar for dollar credit. So if you give one of these EAOs $500, you will get a credit, assuming you meet all the bells and whistles and preserve it and do it like we talked about. You will get a credit that's worth $500 for Missouri taxes. And you will be able to use that credit in the current year if $500 is 50% or less than your current liability. And even if it isn't, then you'll be able to carry forward the excess for 40 years in the future. I think that's the mechanics of both the donation process and the utilization of the credit process for the Missouri MOScholars credit. And so at this point, I think I turn it over to Susan to talk about the what we call the non-tax benefits.
Sure. That sounds good. So I guess one question that might come up for folks is how did we get here and why do we have this program? Missouri's MOScholar program is a few years old. It was one of the first tax credit funded scholarship programs in the country. And it is, I'm guessing this slide's just saying like who is contributing to this. If you want to go ahead, Zach, through this slide and reporting in the media about the program, and you can go to the next slide and expanding it. Let's just stop here. Okay, great. So essentially, in general, the idea of parents being able to choose where their kids go to school, including private schools and homeschooling, has grown significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. Certainly COVID led to a big upswing in this. And now we have as many as 17 states, it kind of depends on how you define it, that are allowing parents to either take public money to the school of their choice or to get a full tax credit for tuition that they pay, which is being done in Oklahoma, or in some cases, like in Missouri, to get scholarships that are funded by individuals and corporations through donations to scholarship granting organizations. And in Missouri, since the program launched, it's been able to serve currently around 4,000 students. The students receive scholarships of around $6,700. There are some cases where students can get more, but the way that the scholarship granting organizations have been managing the program, they should get at least $6,700. And that number again should be going up. But and so in this past year, the program is able to serve about 4,000 students. The tax credits that are awarded were initially limited to a statewide total of $25 million, and that number increased to $50 million in 2024, and now it's $75 million, a number that's tagged to an index and will theoretically go up every year. By comparison, the amount actually raised has not hit those limits yet. In 2024, less than 24 million of the 50 million was raised. So, but the 6 organizations that are dispersing the tax credits and taking the donations have started to hit their stride. They have better processes in place. I think you guys showing how easy the system is has impacted that, and I think folks are getting more used to it, and the word is getting out. There's organizations across the state that are helping parents access it, helping donors access it, and the treasurer's office itself has been trying to promote the program. So fundraising, we should expect to go up. If you want to go to the next slide, Zach. So again, only Missouri and Florida right now have tax credit funded ESAs. And what is the difference? A lot of states have tax credit funded, essentially school vouchers, where these programs take in tax credit donations and parents get like a voucher to attend a private school. Only Missouri and Florida have programs where parents actually get the scholarship money into an account, and it can be spent on tuition and fees for a private school. It can also be spent, as was mentioned earlier, on educational therapies, on homeschooling, on curricula, and a lot of other things that make it more flexible. Florida has this type of program as well. When you recall that Missouri is serving maybe 4,000 or 5,000 students, Florida had over 106,000 students receiving tax credit funded ESAs in 2024, 2025. And about 2 years ago, the Florida legislature decided to appropriate funds for any students who wanted to get a scholarship but were on the wait list. And that's like a supplement to their tax credit funded ESAs. And they are funding, I think it says 220,000. So they're looking at like 350,000 students in Florida have either tax credit funded or by virtue of being on the wait list, have publicly funded ESA scholarships, which is incredible. It's certainly growing. And again, it was mentioned that the students that are eligible either have an IEP or they're from a low-income household, but the low-income stipulation 2 years ago was changed. Well, 2 years ago, several changes were made to the law. It used to be limited to a small number, fewer than 10 communities throughout the state, and the low-income designation was 2 times the poverty line. That's been expanded to 4 times. I believe it's 4 times free reduced price lunch. But the result is that now that it is statewide, over 85% of Missouri students are actually eligible to get an ESA. But the caps on tax credits, and this year the legislature appropriated $50 million in public funds for the program, is probably going to limit that to no more than 20,000 students, and Missouri has about 850,000 students. So still a relatively small program. Some states, Arizona, Florida, Arkansas, and Alabama, have ESA programs where the state has agreed to publicly fund every student in the state, which has caused them to grow quite quickly and it to be quite large. Texas just passed a publicly funded ESA program and pledged $1 billion towards it in the first year. So Missouri is one of these 17 states that has some form of this, but we are going to end up being one of the few that funds it through tax credits. And in Florida, because double the amount that are funded through tax credit donations are funded publicly, it makes it less clear why the scholarship granting organizations would continue to try to fundraise through donations. But there are individuals and corporations in Florida who really like to donate to this program. So they continue to have the tax credit option. You want to go to the next slide, Zach? And then just in from a larger sense, you know, there are 76 now school choice programs in 35 states. It used to be a very rare occurrence. It was considered a very controversial thing when Milwaukee started the first program in the early 90s, but now there are over 1.25 million students in either publicly funded or tax credit funded ESAs or scholarships or voucher programs being used to attend private schools or home schools or a combination of the two. Out of about 48 million students. So it's really growing, and it's grown fast since COVID. And I would expect it to continue to grow. And hopefully in Missouri as well. And I think that is my last slide, but I know that there were some questions, and one that I was just going to address as part of this. We put this slideshow together before the One Big Beautiful Bill was passed, but there was already a question about the tax credit provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill that will most likely augment the MOScholars program. Derek knows more than I do regarding the actual details of the law, but it appears to be a program that will supplement the 75 million in tax credits at the state level. There will be tax credits available for your federal tax return. You can't use the same donation twice for both Missouri and federal, as I understand it, but it does mean that Missouri could give away 75 million in state tax credits and potentially another at least 100 million, if not more, in federal tax credits. I assume that that means people could donate above that 50% level and use the other part of it for a federal tax credit rather than carrying it forward. I also would assume that it means that somebody from out of state can contribute to a Missouri scholarship granting organization and take a federal tax credit, and it wouldn't necessarily just be limited to Missouri taxpayers, although I'm really speaking beyond my knowledge of this. But that program is going to be at least $4 billion to be distributed to states, and it's going to be distributed to states that want the tax credits and to states that already, like Missouri, have what we call EAOs in place, or scholarship granting organizations, and we already have a mechanism, and I would say even sort of like a level of comfort with getting tax credits for donating to these scholarship organizations. I think that Missouri's very well positioned to be one of the first states to take advantage of the federal tax credits as well.
Yeah, so the federal credit, it's limited to $1,700
Yep.
total. And so, and the other rule that's in the federal rule is that if you donate an amount of money and you claim the Missouri credit, you can't take the federal credit for that particular dollar. So, for example, so you could use in theory both. Let's say you made a $3,000 donation to one of the EAOs. So in theory, you could use 1,300 of that for your Missouri state tax liabilities and 1,700 for your federal tax liabilities, but you can't double dip. There's a specific rule in the federal rule that you can't double dip. And the other requirement is that you're only entitled to take the credit with respect to a donation in a state that effectively signs up. And signing up it appears to be pretty simple. It looks like the governor or a designee of the governor just has to tell the IRS, here are the EAOs that are qualified in our state. And so I would assume relatively quickly, if it hasn't already happened, that the governor's office or the governor designating the treasurer's office has or will soon tell the IRS that here are our 6 for now. And if there are other EAOs that Missouri qualifies, obviously they'll tell the IRS that too. So what this will allow is, instead of carrying forward, it'll allow people to utilize a larger amount of their donation up front and carry forward less going forward. So you're benefiting from a time value of money perspective with the addition of this federal credit. So that's good. I mean, it'll encourage more people to do this, I would think.
All right, and Thank you, Derek, Keith, and Susan. Before we get on to some other questions, Derek and Keith, did you want to clarify example one any
Yeah, yeah.
further
So
before I take it down?
yeah, so example one should read the Missouri credit should be $25,000. So in the third line there, and then the tax due should be also $25,000.
All right.
So the way it's set up is what the state doesn't want people doing is paying a huge amount, what they would consider a huge amount for these credits, and then writing zero checks to the Department of Revenue at the end of the year, such that they're not funding other governmental functions. So they only want you to be able to take half of your Missouri tax liability off by the use of this credit.
Okay. So we'll move on to some other questions now. And I want to remind everyone to submit your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The first one for Derek and Keith is kind of fundamental. How do you determine your Missouri tax liability?
You hire a good accountant. Your Missouri tax liability is basically, when you fill out your Missouri, you fill out your federal income tax return, your Missouri income tax return. So you have your income, you have your deductions, which could be the standard deduction or itemized deductions. And then before taking into account your credits, the bottom line is the amount of tax. So you'll have your Missouri taxable income as a number, and then the current Missouri income tax rate, I believe, is 4.7%. So you take your income times 4.7%, that's your Missouri tax liability. And so it's basically when you do your return, how much money do you owe in tax? And that does not take into account, if you're an employee somewhere, and your employer is withholding your Missouri income tax, on a paycheck by paycheck basis. Those are not taken into, those are used to satisfy your Missouri tax liability, but that's not part of your Missouri tax liability. So let's say at the end of the year, I owe, I figure my income and my deductions and so forth, and it's determined that I owe the state of Missouri $30,000 for the year. And so that's my Missouri tax liability. And I can satisfy that in a number of ways. Bryan Cave can withhold from my check, and they do, so much money. And so let's say they've withheld $20,000 from my check. So I will satisfy that liability in part through that $20,000 that I've paid to the state through withholding. I can also satisfy the remainder by writing a check out of my own pocket on April 15th, or if I've made donations to this program. Let's say I've made a donation of $10,000, which will be good to show that. So if I've made that donation of $10,000 and my Missouri tax liability were $30,000, 10 is less than half of 30. So I could satisfy my low tax liability with a $10,000 credit and $20,000 through my withholding.
Okay, and we've gotten a couple questions about timing. So
Yeah.
you need to do this before you file your taxes, before the end of the year. What are some of the deadlines that people should be aware of?
So you need to make the donation by the end of the year, and that means so before that you'll have to go to the Missouri Treasurer's office and reserve the credit, and these are done first come first serve with each of the EAOs. And so and as Susan said, so far that hasn't been an issue because there are more credits available than people who have claimed them. But if this program gets more popular, and with the publicity, it very well may, you probably don't want to wait until December 30th to reserve a credit. You probably want to do it sooner than that. And you have to have made your donation by the end of the year.
Okay.
So if you want to apply the credit for your 2025 Missouri income tax liability, you'll have to have reserved the credit and made the donation before December 31st. But if, a ton of people hear the seminar and go rushing to the internet to do this, and they somehow, all of them get allocated, then you're out of luck. You have to wait till next year.
Susan, you mentioned a few of the use cases for this money, what people are allowed to spend the scholarship money on. Can you give us some more detail on that? Someone asked about tutoring. So what's the list of acceptable spends?
So yes, it can be used for tutoring, and Missouri's running their program like many states through a digital wallet platform called Class Wallet. So your money gets deposited into an account under your child's name through Class Wallet, and then Class Wallet has a platform where you spend your money. Now, I believe, I don't want to be incorrect here, but almost all, if not all, of the scholarship recipients at this point are using it for private school tuition and fees, textbooks, expenses at a private school. It's eligible, the funds are eligible for educational therapies, tutoring, curriculum, standardized tests, so that you could theoretically also use them to homeschool. I'm not sure if any recipients are currently using it to homeschool. But I will say this, that in some states like Arizona, that has a very open ESA program, many of the parents use it to homeschool or to do a hybrid, and they use it for a variety of things, including extracurriculars, music, sports, online, and then also like enrichment activities like museums and gardening and all kinds of things. And as the program has grown, parents have expanded what they're using their funds for to really create very tailored educational experiences for their children. It's become a very popular thing. At the same time, just from an economics point of view, the supply side has responded. They have more private schools than they used to have. Most states have fewer private schools today than they had 10 years ago. Arizona has more private schools, and what they're calling schools has expanded, like homeschool co-ops, micro schools, different forms, online schools, different forms of schools. So it's like Arizona scholarship recipients are sort of determining how big this supply side is going to get. Missouri could do the same thing as this program grows, and certainly maybe the influx of federal tax credits and the state publicly funding it will allow Missouri parents to equally put together these, very tailored educational experiences for each of their children, but it hasn't happened yet. I should say, well, I said therapies, tutoring, curriculum, standardized tests, and then private school expenses right now.
Can a donor make a donation through their IRA as a qualified charitable donation?
That question always comes up. There are tax advisors who will tell you that the answer is yes. I don't subscribe to that view. And the example I always give is, I don't know how many people here have played in a charity golf tournament before, but if you play in a charity golf tournament, and let's say I paid $200 to play in the tournament, I always get a receipt that says your charitable donation is $125 because you got to play golf and that cost $75 to play. In my view, it's hard to see how, if I give a donation of $500 to a charity, and the state of Missouri gives me a piece of paper worth $500 back, it's hard for me to see how you can make a charitable donation and take a deduction for that. Although I will tell you, there are people who think that works. So that question always comes up in these types of seminars, and that's the answer I always give. So,
Susan, someone asked a question about the Treasurer's Office updating us as the year progresses on how close we are to the cap. Do you know if there's currently progress reports?
Again, what I know about that is that the Treasurer's Office has at least issued an RFP, if not selected, a vendor, a third party, to create a website around all of the data regarding MOScholars. So kids served, where those kids go to school, this is all in the law that created the program. They also need to report on how those kids are doing in school. I believe that information has been collected over the last few years, but not really compiled or made public, but that is in the works. And so I would expect before the end of the year that the Treasurer's Office will have sort of a data page in addition to all of the other resources on the MOScholars page.
Okay. And I don't know who wants to take this one, but are there any tips for how to evaluate these EAOs? I assume they're all the same from a donation standpoint, but do any of you have any best practices for evaluating before donating?
I would say in part, as Derek said, some of them are focused on different things, right? Some are regional, some are religious-based, whether that's, faith-based or other criteria. So in part, maybe start by looking at one that is consistent with what your goals are, what you're trying to support. Maybe it's regional, maybe it's for kids to go to Christian school, that kind of thing. So I think that would be one of the starting points. And then they all have really good websites. They all have, they're all there to help. The ones I've worked with have people on staff there to help you through the process. They're very quick. They're all, in my experience, they're all very good. I think just like what you would with any donation to a charity, check them out, look at their website. Their tax returns will be online, but those are obviously delayed between the time they file them and the time they get put online. Information about them will be on the Secretary of State website. But yeah, I think starting point is one more aligned with what your goals are personally. So.
I would just add that the Children's Educational Alliance of Missouri, CEAM, has a great website to help parents who are interested in the program and also to help donors. So I would consider looking at their website as well.
Is there a limit to how many organizations can be designated as EAOs?
Yes, I think it's 10. I could be mistaken, but I believe it's 10. It's statutorily based.
It's related to the number of donations too. So if we exceed the limit, then they can add them. But 6 is the current limit, I believe.
Yeah, there are 6 now. Yeah, I think they can go. I don't know. The answer is yes, but what it is, not 100% without going back to the statute.
Okay, so it could increase from the current 6 to up to 10.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. What happens if I give more than 50% of my Missouri tax liability?
Then you can either carry over the excess to next year, or you could apply $1,700 of that to your federal tax liability.
Okay.
Or I guess, I mean, it's, you can do one, the way the federal credit is going to work is, you can pick how much, I believe, I mean, they haven't worked out all the details, but you're capped at $1,700. So you could choose for whatever reason. It's like, I don't want to hassle with the federal return. I'm just going to carry over all of my excess for next year in Missouri. Or you could apply $1,700 of your excess to your federal and carry over any other excess from Missouri to the next year. So assuming that you're going to have Missouri tax liabilities in the future, in the next 4 years, you'll be able to apply the donation credit to those future years. So it's not like it's a use or lose over 1 year. It's really use or lose over 5 years.
Okay. And Susan, you touched on this a little bit, but what happens if the treasurer's office receives more than the current cap on donations?
I'm not clear how that would work because you have to reserve the credit.
Yeah, I would assume they wouldn't let you reserve. I mean, like, because when you go on the website, each of the EAOs has on that drop down, it has a number on it. That's how much they have left. And so if their number's down to 0, you can't reserve any credits for that EAO.
Okay. Susan, are there any accreditation guidelines that you're aware of for organizations that can become EAOs?
I thought I might have seen the question applying to schools. No? The schools the private schools do have to be accredited to participate in the program. I think that they have some options for accreditation, but they do have to be accredited. Some schools have chosen not to participate and some have chosen to participate. And the EAOs are accredited by the state. They are selected, and I guess that, I don't know if it means accredited, but they are selected by the state.
Can a private school set up an EAO to grant scholarships to their school?
No, I think they would have to work with one of the existing EAOs, unless we got to the point where there were so many EAOs, but I don't think we're going to get there. So they would have to work with one of the existing EAOs. And I think that while I could be wrong about this, just for the record, some of the EAOs have certain missions, like the Herzog Foundation has a mission of Christian schools. They also work with non-sectarian schools. So it's not the case that if a private school wanted to be part of this program, they just need to connect to one of the EAOs. They don't necessarily have to pass a litmus test to be part of that.
How do the EAOs determine how much they can give via each scholarship?
It's in the law. So there is something called the statewide adequacy target for each student in Missouri. It's currently around, there was much argument last year, let's just say $7,000-ish. And it is based on the statewide adequacy target. There is weights applied to low-income students and or economically disadvantaged and for students with disabilities, and they also could receive that weighted amount. I just know anecdotally that some of the EAOs, in an interest to serve as many kids as possible, are prioritizing the number of kids served more so than increasing the scholarship amounts, but they are allowed to also increase those amounts for students in those two categories. But it's around $7,000.
Yeah, I would add there's a parent handbook that the state treasurer's office puts out. This is a really good resource for parents, not necessarily the donors, but for parents who want to get set up with one of these. And it goes through one of those questions, like Susan said, with the weighted amount, how much you can get into your scholarship award, that kind of thing. So all that's in there, and it's a good resource.
Okay, and I think this is a good point to measure. Are there any other resources that you would recommend that we haven't mentioned yet? And you can think about it, and I can come back to you on that. But any other common resources?
No, I think the treasurer's office website's pretty good. And like I said, this handbook is good from the parents' perspective. I think all the EAOs have good discussions about the tax credits and how to avail them. And again, they have people on staff that you can actually call and say, hey, help me walk through this, or help me understand this, or what does this mean? Which is also helpful. Like I said, it's not just, it's mostly electronic, but you can get a live person through one of these EAOs after you select ones.
Okay. Susan, can you talk a little bit more about the third-party administration that you mentioned, Class Wallet, and I know there's some other companies that states have used, but can you give us a better idea of just kind of what the mechanics of that process looks like?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of states have been using Class Wallet. Arizona started off with Bank of America debit cards, which a lot of people actually really liked. You got your money loaded on the debit card, and that way, if you bought something at Target, the stripe on the debit card kept you from buying anything that wasn't approved. But with Class Wallet, you have to use a vendor within the Class Wallet system, which all of the accredited private schools in Missouri are part of the Class Wallet system. That's how you'll know which private schools you can pick from. One limitation is that you can't get reimbursed, as I understand it, for purchases outside of Class Wallet. There are other similar companies, like Odyssey was used for the Missouri Close the Gap scholarship that existed for like 30 seconds. There are other companies doing this, but I would say that in an ideal world, I would prefer for the program to have multiple platforms, not just Class Wallet, but some of the EAOs could have their own platforms, or there could be other third-party platforms where parents would, once they get this money and they can pick where their kids go to school, I think they ought to also be able to pick the platform that they use, because there's people who love Class Wallet and people who hate Class Wallet, but that's what we're using right now. It's a large company that does a lot of these. They are, anyway, that's how it works. You get a Class Wallet account that you access and you use to spend the money.
If a child receives a scholarship, and then the next year they apply for another scholarship, are they prioritized at all if we run into a cap situation?
Yes. Yes. Prior scholarship recipients and siblings, I believe, are both prioritized. We haven't hit a cap. And I mentioned that the state publicly funded the program to $50 million, which was, I believe, largely to fix the mismatch between December 31st deadline of claiming your credit and August 1st when kids start school. So there's always been this kind of gap where a lot of the money comes in November and December, but they want to be able to promise scholarships starting in August or September. And so some of the EAOs were bridging that gap financially for families, like promising it. But now there is this $50 million that should smooth that out, the difference between donation timing and school timing. And I think that, like I said earlier, as these EAOs are and we're all just getting better at this program, it's been in existence for a few years, and some kids have been using it now for 3 or 4 years. It's got a real coalition behind it, and the kids who are in the program, of course, have the highest priority.
Derek and Keith, as people go through this process and not just deadlines, but what about documentation? As people donate, what documents should they make sure they have ready for when they file their taxes?
So the EAO will receive a receipt, or what I call the certificated credit, from the state treasurer's office, and then the EAO gives that back to the donor, and the donor just attaches that piece of paper to their return, and that serves as effectively legal tender for satisfying their tax liability. So that's the piece of paper that you need.
Okay. And other than individuals, what about for businesses, corporations? You touched on a little bit on during the presentation, but are there any other considerations that businesses or corporations should take into account?
They're the same. I mean, they're, again, if you're doing this, you're doing good, you're doing good by doing well, you're still subject to the limit on the ability to take the credit of up to 50% in the year that you make it, and then you can carry it forward, but otherwise it's the same.
Okay. Can you earmark a donation to an EAO specifically for low-income children or children with disabilities?
Other than within, the purpose, you can earmark to an EAO for, this one does primarily religious stuff. So you can earmark in that way, but for a particular child or a particular school, no.
Okay. All right. Well, as we wrap up here in the last few minutes, I kind of want to give everyone an opportunity to cover any ground that we didn't cover in the presentation. Susan, is there anything about the scholarship program or really the push for school choice in Missouri that we haven't covered in the program that you think it's important for our audience to hear today?
Just that we're moving in the right direction. This program was set up and it seems a little complicated to get dollars into the hands of families with the paperwork that's required. That was done largely to put a wall between the government and what parents spend because of some prior litigation. But I think we're moving towards the direction that many other states are, where hopefully the public funding will just continue to grow for the program.
Okay, and Derek and Keith, are there any FAQs that you guys have gotten around this program that we haven't answered today?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And I guess with that, Brenda, I will turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. One of the questions I just wonder about is, as we're looking at these programs, and because we see the discrepancy between the amount that's being contributed and the caps on what could be contributed, and I don't know, Derek, Keith, if you've got any insight into this, what is it that we need to do, besides programs like this, to make people aware of this available tax credit? Because basically, I mean, it is a dollar for dollar, up to 50% of your liability, where you as an individual are saying, or as a corporation saying, I value scholarships for these kids, and that's how I'm going to direct my money, rather than, as I would say from a free market think tank, just giving it to Missouri to let them spend it on whatever they want. What can we do to publicize this more?
Yeah,
It's stuff like this. I mean, I don't think a lot of people are aware. I mean, I don't think there's a general awareness in the Missouri population of this credit. I mean, that's what I think.
and I'll say, there's been similar credits like this over the years, neighborhood assistance programs,
Yeah.
SNAP credits. In my experience, our clients have them unused, right? At the end of the year, they're begging, knocking on donors' doors saying, we have these credits sitting here, we need to fill or use them. And so I think it's just awareness, Brenda. I think it's getting the word out, getting it out broader, better, that this exists, that this is a good thing, and it exists, and it's win-win, right? It's win for
And it's not
donors.
that hard to do, right?
It's if I can do it,
Keith did it today. Yeah.
if I can do it, I think anybody can do it. So
Susan, you look like you had something you wanted to add.
I was gonna say the one question that we get a lot is like, can I make a donation for my grandchild? But you cannot. That's like, we sort of hit on that, but that's a common question. Like, can I donate to this organization that they give a scholarship to this child? And you cannot.
Well, actually, in what the question asked earlier about designating, let me make it a little bit broader. Again, one more question for you all. Okay, so I can't designate it for a child, but can I designate it for a category of child? In other words, if there's priority for low income, there's priority for kids with special needs, can I say, well, I just want to be sure that wherever you award this scholarship, and I know what your mission is, but can you make sure that it goes to a child at this poverty level or a child with disabilities? I can't even make that kind of generic specification.
Not that
No,
I've seen.
no. No, the only way you can pick and choose is by picking and choosing which EAO you make.
Okay, all right. And then one other, and truly, it will be my last question. Do we know if there are other EAOs that are applying to be considered in the state of Missouri? Is it unusual that we have six, so that really we don't want to go to 10?
I think 6 is the statutory limit right now,
Okay,
and it has to do with the amount of donations. And uh, I don't know of any other organizations, but they have to commit to fundraising, so it's just a lot of work, I think.
okay. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. Everyone, there will be an email sent out after this program where you can complete an evaluation of the program. In addition, the slides will be made available, and we'll correct that one example for you all so you'll have the right right number there. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.